Parsha, portion of Reeh, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, to the Jewish people, Reeh anochi nosi lefnechem hayom, brachu klolo. See, I am placing before you today, brachu klolo, blessing and a curse. So what's obviously difficult, Reeh is in the singular. Lefnechem is the plural. See in the singular, I am placing before you in the plural, today, brachu klolo, blessing and curse. So Rashi in his commentary explains, what is the blessing and the curse? Hamuros bahar grizim har evel. The curses which are going to be stated on the two mountains which are opposite one another, Mount Grizim, Mount Evel. They had said, Baruch, blessed is the one who does this. The entire Klal Yisrael said, Amen. Cursed is if one should violate this, do this, cursed. Everybody answers, Amen. It would have been enough for the Torah to say, Anochi nosi lefnechem hayom brachu klolo. I am placing before you today the blessing and the curse. What is the Reeh? See. See, I am placing before you the blessing and the curse. See is a level of understanding which goes beyond intellectualizing. Seeing is something which is factual, which is reality. Every one of us knows that if you put your hand into the fire, you will be burnt. It's not something you understand, it's something you know. Factually, if this is fire, you put your hand in the fire, you will be burnt. Reeh, based on your level of understanding, if it's a level of clarity, of seeing, then you will appreciate what the blessing, what the curse is. What is the degree of appreciation of the blessing and the curse? It's a degree of Reeh, of to what degree you see. So over here the Baal HaTurim explains the reason why it's in singular. Two people visually see the same thing. But each one, based on his perception, has his own unique way of seeing it. Reeh anochi nosei lefnechem. In terms of what I'm placing before you, the plural, the multitudes, blessing and curse. But the internalization and the reality of what you hear and what you experience, that's very individualized. That's unique to each individual. And based on that uniqueness of understanding and seeing and knowing, that will determine the profoundness of the curse and the profoundness of the blessing. This is Reeh. I always say, we read in Pirkei Avos, Ezel Chocham Haroes Hanolad. Who is the wise man? The one who sees the consequence, or what's in the offing. It doesn't say Ezel Chocham. Who's the wise man? Hamevin es Hanolad. The one who understands what's in the offing. It's Roeh. You see it. If you understand something alone, it's abstract. Although you understand, you may not follow through based on what you understand. But if you see it, that means that's an internalization of fact, then you will act based on what you see. For instance, if a person is a well-weathered businessman, very astute, he's been through it, through the thick and thin of financial investment, and he sees this as a definite loss because of his experience. It's not he understands that it will be a financial loss. He's already, as if he's experienced a loss. When you experience it, it's not something I know what's going to be. It's already happened. Because the person sees it as reality. The person doesn't have to put his hand in the fire to be burnt, because he knows putting your hand in the fire, you will be burnt. Because that's a fact. This is Reeh. So based on one's perception, and understanding a fact, that will determine what brocha and kolol is. Esa brocha. What is the brocha? Now, this is interesting. You could explain things to many people, and the person understands what you're telling him. The question is, does the person follow suit? Tishmu doesn't mean hearing with the sense of the power of hearing, utilizing that sense. Tishmu means you grasp, you understand. Understand the blessing and the curse, Reeh. Esa brocha. What is the brocha? Asher tishmu. That when you hear it, you have the capacity to listen. Tishmu. You heed. The blessing is when you heed. Mitzvahs Hashem Elokeichem. Asher anochi b'tzav eschem hayom. This before even actually actualizing doing the right thing. But to be able to grasp it, to be able to heed it, that itself is a blessing. Certain people always do the right thing. Why do they do the right thing? So when the vernacular goes, he gets it. But why does he get it and the other person doesn't get it in the vernacular? Because he is gifted that when he hears something correct, he immediately understands the correctness of it and therefore heeds it. So heeding is a consequence of Asher Tishmu. Esa brocha. Asher Tishmu. It doesn't Asher Tasu. Asher Tishmu al mitzvahs Hashem. You heed the mitzvahs Hashem. Elokeichem. Asher anochim tzav eschem hayom. And what's HaKlola? What is the curse? Im lo sishmu. I hear what you're saying. But you don't heed the words. So what happens if you don't heed the words? Although you know. Then you don't, then you do the wrong thing. So what is the curse? Not only doing the wrong thing. Not having the capacity to appreciate what you hear to do the right thing. If you have the capacity to hear it and to internalize it, that itself is a brocha. Because it will lead to do the right thing. But what's the klola? Falls on deaf ears. Or he doesn't grasp it sufficiently to do the right thing. But that's a curse. And what's the consequence? V'sartem min haderech. You veer from the path. Asher anochi b'tzavcha eschem hayom. L'leches achrei elohim acherim. Ultimately, it leads to even go after false gods. Asher lo yadatem, which you don't know. Over here, the Seforno explains there's something very unique about Torah. If you do the right thing, as we read last week in the Parsha, Ekev Tishmun, Ekev Tishmun, the bounty is unlimited. At every level, in the physical, and in addition, you have the spiritual. Unlimited. And if God forbid, if you do the wrong thing, it's the extreme in the negative. It's a little unusual. There's no middle ground. Rehabitu reish lo ye in yonecho al ofen beinoni. Kemoshu haminig barov. In most situations, you have a middle ground. You know, I'm happy to be in the middle. Ki omnam no chinosu lefnei chayim brocho klolo. What was the comment that they were entering into? It's either all or nothing. Either you have it all or you have nothing. We're talking about two extremes. Two extremes. What is blessing? You succeed more than is what's required. It's beyond. It couldn't be better. God forbid, the curse, it's a curse which totally consumes and destroys the person. I'm presenting you. A or B. Positive or negative. Bracha klola. So what does that say? Now, I'm willing to go halfway. You don't go halfway with God. So you say, well, people, they do many things. Seems to be God's going halfway with them. People, they abandon God totally. And he's still going halfway with them. Or he's going even beyond that, in the positive. So how do we understand it? The answer is, but that's curse. That is klola. If a person, despite the fact that he abandons God, he turns his back on God, and yet things go exceptionally well for him, the man doesn't understand. He's depleting his reserve. That's what he's doing. This Mishalim L'Sonav Aponav Lavido. God is paying off his enemies in his lifetime that he should go into the oblivion, that he should be totally destroyed. The Midrash in this week's portion explains, I'm presenting before you life and death, Obrocha and Klola. What is it analogous to? You have two roads. One road, as far as the eye could see, there's nothing in terms of natural beauty, unbelievable natural beauty. And to the other road, in the other direction, is a level of destruction and suffering and disaster that you can't even imagine what level of suffering will be brought if you take the other road. So one road is to the right, one road is to the left. The left road, beauty, pleasure, safety, something which is so attractive and so enticing and so drawing, it's beyond your imagination. Paradise. And to the left, to the right, it's literally a very rough road to go. So anybody in his rational mind, of course, he's going to the left. He's taking the left road. So there's a wise old man at the crossroads, and he sees this young person about to go to the left. He says, I know exactly what's going through your mind. But I've been here for a while, and I could tell you, and I want to instruct you. He says, it's true, as far as the eye could see to the left, there's nothing which seems to be the equivalent of this in beauty and comfort and pleasure and everything positive that can be said. But after you travel that road for 3 days, you're going to come upon a level of suffering and catastrophe and disaster that you cannot even imagine what that is. But it's 3 days travel. So what your eye could see is only as far as a 3-day travel. And to the right, although the road is very difficult and painful to travel, but after 3 days, you're going to see beauty that within this existence, there's no beauty which is, and pleasure and innate goodness which is comparable to that. But it's only a 3-day travel. You have to be able to tolerate it and survive the 3 days. But after 3 days, and it's forever this way, and as you go on, it gets better. So the Midrash says, what is life? David Melech says in Tehillim, what is the lifespan of a human being? 70 years. Im Gvuros Shmonim Shana. 80 years. 70 years to 80 years versus eternity. What is it? It's a blink of an eye. It's a 3-day travel. That's all it is. So you have a choice. Go to the left. It's a 3-day travel. What happens after 3 days? Everything's depleted. Every bit of goodness you did, you've already been rewarded, been paid. Afterwards, all that's there is suffering and disaster, eternal suffering. To the right side, although lefum tzara agra, life is painful, life is sacrifice. Life is not easy, but it's worthwhile to sacrifice, to demonstrate your belief and your dedication, to do the right thing. And if you do, 3 days, that's all it is. Versus eternity, it's a blink of an eye, forever. Eternity, pleasure, a level that kol chayil mazeh, all this existence, is not the equivalent of koras ruach, as we read in Pirkei Avos. Just one, what we call a whiff of what the world to come is. All this existence encapsulated into one moment is not the equivalent of even passing by what the world to come is. That's what it is, but it's only 3 days. And that's what Moshe is saying to them. You may think it's brocha, but God forbid it's klola. And what you see as a curse, that is the greatest blessing. That's again, It's the perspective. What is the perspective? But how does one have an appreciation for value where seemingly we say the eye is very deceiving? Very deceiving. So how do you gain that level of clarity that despite what's deceiving, you see truth? How do you achieve that? So here the Baal HaTurim says, Es abroch asher tishbu. The blessing is if you heed. So the Baal HaTurim says, Sof Tevis Torah. If you take the last letter of each of these words, Es abroch asher tishmu, it spells the word Torah. Shebeschus HaTorah yavo habrochos. You want tishmu, you want clarity. You want to have true bracha. You want to have an understanding of what a true perspective is. That's Torah. You have to study the Torah. This is Ner Mitzvah Torah Or. What is the illuminator? You know, you have water which is polluted and you're parched. But if you drink the water, almost instantaneously you will become sick and you will die, and the death is going to be a very painful death. But if you wait and you're willing to hold out, but how do you appreciate it? A person is so parched, he can't control himself. He self-deceives himself. Self-deceiving. I can't believe it's not. To me, it seems to be potable. It seems to be fine. Only once he drinks it, then he realizes. So it's deceiving. So because of the person's own conflicts of interest, because he's so parched, a person is driven as a physical being. We have all the animalistic drives. We have needs. We crave. We crave material. How do you wean yourself from the material? How? Humanly, it's impossible. It's impossible. So how do you succeed? So Chazal tell us, Habol l'tayr Messianoso. If you truly, sincerely want to purify yourself, you will merit special divine assistance. Without God assisting you, you cannot succeed. Impossible. Humanly, if you're craving the natural addiction to the material, you will succumb. But if you truly don't want to, you don't want to succumb, and you really want God to help you, God will help you. And it's little by little. You chip away at it. It's a conditioning process. But part of it is, of course, it's not wanting to do the right thing. You have to study. You have to spiritualize yourself. It's interesting. The Or Chaim HaKadosh cites it. The Ramchal cites it. Chofetz Chaim brings it in his introduction to some of his works, that we find that we have Taryag mitzvos, the 613 mitzvos, 248 positive mitzvos, 365 nevik mitzvos. So the Chazal it's medrash that we find that the 248 positive commandments corresponds to the parts of a human being, 248 parts of the person. We find in the Kriya Shema there are 245 letters, words, and if you say Kriya Shema yourself, we introduce it with Kel Melech Nemon. So 245 plus 3 is 248. If one says the Kriya Shema with a minyan, the Shliach Tzibur, one who leads the service, concludes Hashem Elokechem Emes. The 3 completes the number to 248. What's the 248? So the 248, as the Mishnah explains, is what is Kriya Shema? Kabbalah Solmach Shemayim. We accept upon ourselves the yoke of heaven by saying these 3 paragraphs. That means we accept it fully, that every aspect of our being is subordinated to God's will. That's why the 248 words are very crucial. There are no compromises. Every aspect of God's will, we're totally subordinated to God's will. That's 248. So what they bring, that they cite, that just as the 248 parts to the human body, the 248 parts to the neshama, to the Jewish soul, which correspond to every part of the physicality. There's a corresponding factor between the physical of the person and the spiritual of the person. When you do the mitzvah, the neshama, that component of the neshama becomes spiritually energized. and nourished and sustained. And also simultaneously, that part of the body which the mitzvah corresponds to becomes spiritualized. When it becomes spiritualized, it no longer has all the negativities of a physical being. The Orach Chaim HaKosh writes at the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, it says, Kedoshim Tiyu, you should sanctify yourself. Ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokechem. So he speaks over there, the act of procreation. It's a physical act, and it's actually, when a person walks a tightrope, you'd say, if its desire being satisfied, and its sexual desire, the person becomes addicted to that to a degree. You engage in that, you're actually evoking and activating something within yourself which could bring to other not good things. So he cites over there the Zohar that anything, any part of the body that's used for a mitzvah, despite the context of how the mitzvah is actually fulfilled, that part of the body becomes sanctified. Sanctified. And when that sanctification takes place, it has no negative after effect. No negative after effect. There's a mitzvah, Samach b'chagecho. You should rejoice during the festivals, during Yom Tov. Ein simcha l'basa v'yayin. What's rejoicing? Eating meat and wine. But you realize you're feeding a habit, or you're creating a habit. We're not talking about indulgence. We're not talking about hedonism. But factually, you whet your appetite. Naturally, you eat meat, you drink wine. It brings other things. You're creating a habit. It has a negative side to it. If a person does it for the sake of a mitzvah, it has no negative side to it. But physically, you're enjoying it. The Karos Shabbos Oneg. There's a mitzvah Oneg Shabbos. So Oneg Shabbos, it's pleasurable. It's enjoyable. Once you touch upon the senses of a human being sensual, it brings to certain things. If you do it for the sake of Shabbos, to celebrate the Shabbos as with Oneg, or the Yom Tov with Simcha, there's no negative consequence. No negative ramification. Only positive. That's the Brocha Shetishmo. Even though naturally this Habal, but even with that, but how do you do it Lishma? How do you do it with the right intent? You know, I'll do it to indulge. As the Ramban writes, a person can be a Nuvel B'Shus HaTorah. You could be an unsightly person and justify everything. You could have a harem of wives. They're all Jewish women. They all observe family purity. You could have a 20-course meal. Every delicacy. So, what is he? He's a hedonist. We're all within the parameters of what the Torah says is permitted. But is that what a human being is meant to be? That's indulging. You can't say you're doing that for the sake of L'Shem Shamayim, for the sake of God. You're doing it, that's for your own sake. It's not for Hashem's sake. But if a person really wants to do it for God's sake, not for self-gratification, then you will merit. Then it has that spiritualization effect. There's a Abol L'Tair Messianoso. If you want to purify yourself, Hashem will assist you. Says something interesting, very interesting. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, Bracha u'klolo. I am presenting with you blessing and curse. So he says, Yesh bin desinus u'bracha, the Yesh ba'klula. In the same presentation, there's blessing and curse. V'chozer u'pirish. Then he goes to explain, Es ha'bracha asher tishmun. Now, person merits bounty. Two people, and one behaves and acts and lives within conformance of the Torah. The other one does not behave properly. Asher tishmun. In tishmun ti nesinu lachem brocha. If you utilize the brocha as you should and live as God prescribes, then it will be brocha. Vim lo tishmun ein lechem kim klolo. But if you don't, all you can have is a curse. What does it mean? Shebemtzusa yiskana b'chem umos. The non-Jews, they're going to be envious of the Jews. The Jews are living high on the hog. They're in the south of France. They're in the Riviera. They're driving luxury cars. They have their homes who knows where. They have jewelry. They have furs. What about us? There's envy. You know what envy brings to? Ultimately, destruction. But in Tishmun, that's in Lo Tishmun. V'yovdu eschem mimerabah no kama gedola. And ultimately they will destroy you with great vengeance. Because they'll be jealous. They'll say, these Jews. Gabtilem hano mimeno l'ro la'olam hanitzchi. So two things. It will be a curse in this world, because ultimately it's going to evoke the envy of the non-Jewish population. Secondly, and what do you have to show for it? In the world to come, you have nothing. Eternally, you go into the oblivion. But if Tishmun, then it's real bracha. The world sees you in a different light. They see you as a spiritual people. They don't see you as a hedonistic people. They don't see the material as material, because it's being invested in spirituality. So what is your persona? What is the aura? The aura is a spiritual aura. This was in the 17th century, and there were Jews who were in Europe, who were very wealthy, and the wives would go with furs and with jewels and with carriages, footmen, coach drivers, everything. And it really evoked and incited the non-Jewish population. Where Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, Zechet Tzaddik V'Rocha, the Tumim, they had to pass laws in his region that Jews, regardless of their financial worth, women are not permitted to wear fur coats. Women in public are not permitted to wear jewelry, and if you go into a coach, it has to be an ordinary coach. It cannot be anything which is ostentatious, because all it causes is pogroms, envy, and ultimately will destroy the Jewish community. Regardless of what your financial worth is, it's irrelevant. You understand? A person truly is focused on his spirituality. Where do you invest your material? In the coach? In the horse? In the coachman? In the butler? Or do you invest it in upgrading your spirituality? Advancing your spirituality? Providing for the needy? The Rambam writes in the laws of Yom Tif, it's a mitzvah to celebrate the Yom Tif, to rejoice, simcha, meat, wine, to rejoice. But a person's only interested in himself and his family, totally ignores the poor. So Rambam writes, that's called simchas kreso. That's the rejoicing of the belly. That's not what God wants. God wants that every Jew should be provided for, that every Jew could celebrate the Yom Tif. Not all I'm interested is myself, my inner circle. The rest of the Jews are totally irrelevant to me. But I mean for God. If you mean for God, so what about the other Jews, your fellow Jews? How do you forget about them? So that is a confirmation, as much as you speak, but the reality is it's you. It's not God. But again, it could be brocha and kalala. The blessing, if it's not invested properly, as I said, not only are you forfeiting your share in the world to come, because you're not living properly as a Jew, but it evokes the envy of the nations of the world, and it incites them that they want to destroy you, and they do destroy you. We speak about the golden era of Spain. The real golden era of Spain was in the time of the Rishonim, the earlier commentators. This was the glory of Spain. Rambam's time, although there were many problems. Rambam had to flee from Spain. And eventually he was in Egypt. Other leading Torah sages, they had to flee to North Africa because there were all kinds of pogroms. They were driven out. What about the material golden era of Spain? This is pre the Spanish Inquisition. Jews, the wealthy Jews, were not living properly. They were not living properly as Jews. They were government officials. They had estates intermingled with the Gentiles. The Chassid Yavitz writes, who was there at the time of the Spanish Inquisition, that the people who stayed and somehow rationalized to be Marranos, that in secret they're Jews, they couldn't relinquish their wealth. It was too much to give up. The simple, ordinary Jews who were God-fearing, they left. Although they only had the shirts on the back, although they knew they were going to be exposed to every danger, an element of danger that they may not survive. Many of them perished on the way. Whether they were victimized, whether they died of disease, of hunger, whatever it was irrelevant. They weren't going to sacrifice their neshamas for material. The others, somehow, they balanced it. They rationalized. And they stayed. And ultimately what happened? Many of them were caught. Most of them assimilated. Most of Spain assimilated. The Marranos. We read in the Parsha, Bonim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. You're God's children. Los is go to do. You're not permitted to lacerate yourself. We'll see. In the ancient times, if somebody would die, how did they express their grief? They would take a shard of pottery and they would start lacerating the bodies to indicate the pain was so all-consuming they couldn't contain themselves. And they began to mutilate themselves. Self-mutilation. A Jew is not permitted to do this. Los is go do. And you're not permitted to pull your hair out of your head, out of an expression of grief or cause bald spots. Even a person uses a depilatory, lemes, to grieve for the dead. So Rashi explains, why aren't you permitted to do either? Kederach shomoroyim osin, as the ancient people, the Amorites, that's the way they would express their grief. Why aren't you permitted to do it? Lefisha tembonim shel mokom, because you're God's children. V'atam ru'uyim lios noim, and you have to present yourself. You have to be pleasant, not mutilated. V'lo gedudim u'kurochim, not mutilated and with your hair, bald spots in your head. You look unbecoming. You're not presentable. It's a chil Hashem. That's how Rashi explains it, citing the Sifri. Because you're Bonav Shel Mokum, because you're God's children, you have to present yourself in a very appropriate context, demeanor. Not to be mutilated with hair missing different parts of the head. So over here, the Kli Yakar asks on Rashi's interpretation, so if that is the case, why only if it's done for the sake of grief, grieving for the dead? Any reason. For any reason the person wants to mutilate himself, he shouldn't be permitted, because since you're God's children, the person wants to mutilate himself for some other reason, for the loss of money. That's why he wants to express his pain. He's not permitted. But yet, the Torah says explicitly, it's lomes. It's only to grieve over the dead, but if it's not over the dead, you're all permitted. I mean, the separate provision. The person's not permitted to self-mutilate. Because since when do we own our own bodies? We're endowed with the body. You have no right. But this specific provision should apply. It should go beyond grieving over the dead. That's his difficulty. But over here, the Sepharnos explains it beautifully. Why is a person overwhelmed with grief when he loses a loved one? Because he says, how could I live on? How could I continue? How could I continue? What do you mean, how could I continue? Many years ago, there was a certain philanthropist, world-renowned Torah Jew, was the greatest philanthropist, Jewish philanthropist in the world. And he lived in Toronto. His name was Moshe Reichman. Zecher Tzarak Levrocha. Special Jew. and he had a financial downturn. He supported endless Torah institutions, every Jewish cause, Torah cause, and in a very substantial, significant way. And when he had his downturn, although he continued, but it wasn't compared to what he originally. So people said, what are we going to do? Reichman's no longer here. That's what people said to me. I said, what do you mean Reichman's not here any longer? I mean, and when Moshe Reichman had the means to support you, I mean, he was only a conduit. I said, what? What about God? You mean God's not part of this equation? What do you mean? What are we going to do? Pray to God. Who do you think, initially, how do you think you received that endowment? It was only due. He was only the intermediary to give it to you. But why was he blessed? So go, turn to God. Why are you grieving to the degree that you can't contain yourself because life is over? Why is life over? Because the husband's not here. The spouse is no longer here. The parent is no longer here. But you're God's children. All is not lost. Your father is still here. And the father you have, there's nothing comparable to this father. There's nothing he can't provide. And whatever he does it for a good reason. As we acknowledge God for the material, when we understand the goodness in it, even God forbid tragedy befalls a person. It's the ultimate good of a person. Read the Sephorno's words. It's not appropriate for a person to display an unlimited level of worry and pain for the relative who passes away. Where you have a relative who's more exalted than the one who you'd lost and who could bring about good. On your behalf. So why are you being consumed with this grief? If you're his bonim, if you're his children, he's your father. And this father is here forever. Therefore, for no, regardless of how special the deceased is or was, it's irrelevant. You have God. If there's God's here, what are you grieving? Of course, you have to display and express pain. But to be totally consumed that you stop mutilating yourself, this is like all hope is lost. There's no such thing, all hope is lost for a Jew. The Father is Kaim La'ad. He's here forever. And who is this Father? He's Tikvas HaTov. Your hope for all good lies in Him, nobody else. Then it continues. Ki am kodosh atol Hashem Elokecho. You are a holy nation to God. What is the holiness? What does it indicate? Person says, no, I'm not grieving for myself. I'm grieving for the person who's no longer here. Look what he's lost. Look what he's missed. He will no longer have his grandchildren. He won't have all the simchas and the pleasures of life. You mean you're worried about the person who's no longer here? As we say, maybe he's in a better place than you are. Than you'll ever be. There's no reason to grieve over the person who's no longer here because he died. Ki am kodosh ato. Because you're a holy people. What's kodosh? What's kedusha? Mezuman l'chaylam abo. You're destined for the world to come. Asher sh'as koras ruach be'em yofim mikol chaylam hazeh. As it says in Pirkei Avos. One moment of the world to come is more than this whole world combined. So what? You're grieving for the person who's no longer here? We can't even relate to what the world to come is. That's how special it is. So what's the basis for this uncontrolled behavior? To mutilate yourself, to tear the hair out of your head, because you can't contain yourself. So what does it say? It's a reflection on what your true beliefs are. There's no reason to lose it whatsoever. It's interesting. The Baal HaTurim points out in the verse, Bonam atem l'Hashem Elokeichem, until you're not permitted, if you count the words, the 12 words in the Pasuk. 12 words. So he says, Yud Beis Tevus B'Pasuk, Keneged Yud Beis Shiftechem Shnikru Bonam l'Hashem. The 12 tribes, Bonam atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. That's the number 12. It's interesting, we find that Yaakov, when he believed that Yosef was no longer alive, he was willing to be consoled. So seemingly, he didn't chas v'sholom, but he was in sackcloth. He grieved over Yosef for 22 years, and he could not be, as much as they tried to console him, he couldn't be consoled. Why not? No, let go already. It's too much. So over there, the Sifsei Chachamim's commentary explains that because the Gemara tells us that only the dead is forgotten from the heart. But since Yosef was alive, that's why he couldn't let go, because factually he was alive. Okay, that's one interpretation. But factually, what was he grieving? What was Yaakov grieving? Yaakov was told, he had a Masorah, he had a tradition, that if any of his children die in his lifetime, he will not have a share in the world to come. What's the share in the world to come? That's his relationship with God. So he was grieving over his spirituality. It wasn't the physicality. It wasn't the son that he loved. Yosef was his successor. The only thing that could guarantee and perpetuate the eternity of Jewish people, there had to be a provider who had similar ability as he had. So even after he passes on, Yosef was going to set the spiritual security in Egypt that they should be able to ultimately come to Sinai. But if he dies in his lifetime, especially Yosef, he's inconsolable. Cannot be consoled. Because what's at stake now? It's no longer his beloved son. That there was something of a physical relationship between the father and his son, or love. This was rooted in his spirituality. He was speaking about, if you understand the loss within the spiritual context, you're consoled. You have to grieve. But after a point, you let go. What about the person? If you believe, there's nothing you don't grieve for the person. You grieve for yourself. But after you've grieved sufficiently for yourself, you let go. There's nothing more to grieve for. So what is this? Is based on one's belief. This is a tenet of Judaism. You know, what happens after a person dies? He goes on to a better place. And if a person can't let go, it's part of a problem. It's part of a problem. This brings into question, is your belief really sufficient? As you say, we say something, maybe lip service. But when, as we say, when you put to the test, unfortunately, the person is not able to survive it. Over here, the Rechaim Kodesh says something interesting. He says, what's bonam atem l'Hashem Elokeichem? Tzorch das ma tam somach maimer abonam atem l'maimer l'susgo. What does being his children have to do with do not lacerate yourself? So he says, nireh sheniskavin loma shebmisas ish in aveda lemes. When a person dies, the person is not lost. What if a person goes on a trip for 3 years? The person exists. He's just not with you. A person sends his son on a buying trip to go out of town. And then the father sends for his son to return. So when the son leaves the location where he was at, engaged in the purchase. So when he leaves that place, he's no longer in that location. So where is he now? He's returned to the father. Avalokoponim, yeshno, he exists. The son exists. The son returned to where he was supposed to return. So when a Jew comes to this world, what does he come to this world for? It's only for a short stay. That's all it is. It's a buying trip. This is the so-called fair. It's a 70-year fair, 80-year fair. You have endless opportunity. You're able to make purchases here where the profits are unlimited. When the time's up, the father calls the son back. It's time to come home. Shu makor hachayim. The son returns to the source of life. So what are we grieving over? What are we mutilating ourselves? Which is not the case to the non-Jew. The non-Jew, he's not God's child. He may be God's creation, but the relationship is not father-son. You are God's children. Lishlo, to exclude, the inferences to exclude other nations. Once they die, it's over. They go to the oblivion. A non-Jew has to be a special person. He has to be from Chasidu Masa'olam. He has to abide by the 7 Noahide laws with all the conditions to be classified as Chasidu. If not, they go into the oblivion. It's interesting. It's not an aside. You know, the Arabs, the Muslim world, they claim they're a monotheistic people. Monotheism. They only have one God. So recently, this was the head of Hamas, Yimach Shemam Zichram, every one of them. So they shot the rockets, thousands of rockets into Israel. 80% that was not shot down by the Iron Dome missed the targets, fell into open areas. Relatively speaking, the damage was less than minimal. So they asked the head of Hamas, you people are supposed to be experts. Seemingly, every missile misses its target. What's going on? He says, you don't understand. It's the Allah of the Jews that does not allow it to hit its target. This was public radio. The Allah of the Jews. Yimach Shemav Zichroch. If you people are monotheistic, what do you mean the Allah of the Jews? There's only one God. What do you mean the Allah of the Jews? So all this, what they're going through, they call holy war. They're a bunch of barbarians. They're subhuman, these people. They're evil. They say they're this, but it's clear they're not that. They're not monotheistic. But they will destroy anybody who doesn't believe in their belief. Because you're an infidel. Infidel. Yourself an infidel. You don't believe what you say. How do you come out with such a statement? The Allah of the Jews? So what's the Jew? Bonam atem l'Hashem Elokechem. Atem. You're God's children. When you leave, the Father's calling you back. The non-Jew, unless he's Chasidu Masa'olam, that he meets the criteria, whatever that is, abide by the 7 Noahide laws, with all its criteria, you don't want to know where they're going. They go into the oblivion, into a level of suffering which we don't want to know about. That's the reality. We hear the pasuk says, I am placing before you today blessing and curse. Then it says, es habrocha. It should say habrocha. The word es seems to be superfluous. What's the es? Es is always an adjunct. For instance, es Hashem Elokecha tiro. There's a mitzvah to revere God. It should say Hashem Elokecha tiro. What's es? In Hebrew, there's no interpretation of the word es. And it means there's an adjunct. There's someone else other than God wants you to revere. Who is that? Who is that? The Rabbos Talmidei Chachamim. God wants you to revere the Torah sage no less than you revere him. That's the es. So if it says originally, I am placed before you bracha uklola, it should say habrocha. What's es habrocha? What is asher tishmun? So the es evidently is telling me something other than explicitly what's explicit in the pasuk. So here the Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains, Lohoir, the es comes to make us aware, Bilvar habrocha museges miderech Hashem. Besides the blessing which we receive from God, the blessing, bounty, sharing the world to come, whatever that is, odlo ima yir hatov. There's something which accompanies it, something which is very positive. And what is that? Asher tishmu. The bracha is asher tishmu. What's asher tishmu? Ki hashmiya bator hu tainug muflo u'machaya nefesh. If a person is able to fully appreciate Torah concepts, we're talking about the study of Torah, listening to the words which are truth, God's words, Torah Hashem. It's tainug muflo. It's a pleasure which is beyond, and it brings life. It nourishes the soul. K'omru cites a verse in Shai. Shimu schi nafshechem. Listen, and will give life to you in the neshamos. Harmagish b'tam Torah. A person who tastes the taste of Torah, what it is. Tasichenu nafsho ki olav l'shalim. Person studies, and he truly is able to internalize and relate to the sweetness and the pleasure of Torah. He feels he has to pay God. He's not looking for reward. He feels God owes him nothing. He owes God. He is the debtor. It's like a person says, could you help me? And the person who he's helping happens to be one of the most special people. And what he's able to cull from this person who he's exposed to, he couldn't learn from anybody for the next 50 years. So the person who he assisted says, maybe I could pay you for your assistance. You help me. He says, you want to pay me? He says, you can't imagine what I gained from you, from just observing you and having the privilege to be associated with you. I couldn't pay all the money in the world. I couldn't achieve this or attain this. A person who tastes the pleasure of Torah and experiences its pleasure, you feel God owes you nothing. You owe it to God. If you feel you're a debtor, you're going to feel that God owes you something. So now it's interesting. It's very interesting. I created the Torah, the Yitzhara. The antidote is the Torah. Now, so there's the obvious question, which Orach Chaim addresses in one location. Does anybody studies Torah should never sin? Because he always says the antidote. So he says, no, that's only Torah Lishma. If you study Torah for the sake of Torah, only then it's an antidote. So when we speak about enjoying Torah to a degree that you feel that you're the debtor, what kind of Torah is that? That's Torah study purely for the sake of Torah. If you study Torah for the sake of Torah, then you have an antidote. That's when the Torah resonates within the person. And the person, it's an experience that there's no experience in the world compared to that experience. So if that's the case, a person's not enticed by anything. Whatever could be offered as an exchange, well, you know, I'll give you a pound of lead for a pound of platinum. A pound for a pound. But if you understand, well, but you realize, troy weight is less than regular weight. You know something? I'll take the lesser weight in platinum than for a pound of lead. Because you understand what platinum is. If a person understands what Torah is, the Tainuk, he's Tainuk HaNafshi, what it does for the soul, what it gives you when you internalize its reality. You know, every day we say in the Shachris, Ashreinu Matov Chelkeinu. Fortunate we, our portion, our lot, Ma Yofi Ushasenu, and how beautiful is our inheritance. When you say that, we're fortunate for our portion, for our lot, and how beautiful is our inheritance. Could you imagine a person getting the crown jewels? Besides their material, financial value, the beauty of they've been passed down through generations, crown jewels. And you have them, if you appreciate what that is. So if you have something which is beyond that, and it touches your essence, your neshama, what are you going to exchange? You're not going to waste your time with anything else. Understanding, it's not even the question that has no value. You feel indebted that you're the debtor. That's how invaluable what you have. But you have to study Torah Lishma. That's Barasi, Yitzhar Barasi, Torah Tavlin. But you're studying the same Torah. Why only if I study it Lishma? Is it the Tavlin? Why not if I study it with a self-interest? Because everything, what it does and how it impacts on you, it spiritualizes you. That's Abol Tire Messianoso. It's what is the quality of the purification that you're looking for. You want to better yourself. Why do you want to better yourself? So just thinking, you know, one of the brachos in the Shmoneh Esrei is Hashivenu Avinu Sarasecho. Bring us back. Hashivenu Avinu. Our Father, bring us back to your Torah. V'karvenu Malkeinu Avdesecha. Now, why do you want to come back to his Torah? And why do you want to be brought close to his service? Why? Because you want to be in good standing? Or because truly, for the sake of doing the right thing, you want to come back to Torah? Why do you want to purify yourself? Why? That God should have mercy on you. Is that why you want to do the right thing? Because life is complicated and tough? You want God to protect you? But that's Shlo Lishma. That's not the reason why. Of course, it's a level. It's an exceptional level. But a person truly wants Hashivenu L'Sarasecha. Bring us back because that's what I want to be. I want to be the Torah Jew. I want to be your subject. That's what I want. V'karvenu Malkeinu V'secha. Bring us close to your service, our King. I want to be a true subject. So what are you requesting? The level of tara, of purification you're asking, is an exceptional level of purification. Then that's already the Lishmo. So you're asking for that you want to be a Lishmo Jew. The different levels of aspirations, different levels of supplications. So based on what you ask, that's what God gives you. You want less, he'll give you less. If you're worthy. If you're worthy on both levels. But what do we have to ask for? We have to ask for, we want to experience in a way that we should appreciate who we are and what we have. That when we say, Ashreinu Matov Chelkeinu, we should truly internalize the good fortune that we feel. Ma'anoim Goraleinu, Ma'yof Yisreinu, when we say, Ashri Yoshev V'secho, Ashri Yoshev V'secho, Oji Alu Chaselo, and the person's there for 5 minutes, he says, I have an appointment, I have to leave. I mean, you're just proclaiming, declaring, Ashri Yoshev V'secho. How fortunate are we, those who dwell in your house. So where are you escaping to? Where are you running? Well, you have to catch the train to go out to who knows where. But there's nothing comparable to this. You're closing a deal which has infinite worth. Where are you running? Are you foolish? What are you exchanging what for what? But again, so we have to pray for Siyata Dishmaya that we should see it correctly and appreciate what has to be appreciated and to reject what should be rejected.